Life often presents us with challenges, struggles, and battles that seem overwhelming. In moments of doubt or fear, it's easy to wonder if we are truly in control of our circumstances. However, as followers of Christ, we are reminded through the scriptures that no matter how daunting life may appear, God's sovereignty reigns supreme. One verse that encapsulates this truth is Isaiah 14 verse 27, which says, "For the Lord of hosts has purposed, and who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back?" This powerful verse from the book of Isaiah speaks of God's absolute authority and the certainty of his plans. The phrase, "the Lord of hosts has purposed," reminds us that God has a divine plan for every aspect of creation, and his purposes cannot be thwarted by any force, be it human or spiritual. His will is unstoppable, and no one can undo what he has set in motion. Isaiah 14 verse 27 calls us to recognize that God's plans are not subject to human whims or the forces of nature. It is an invitation to trust in his wisdom, knowing that he is always at work for our good, even when circumstances are difficult. While we may not always understand why things happen the way they do, we can be confident that God's purposes will ultimately prevail. His plans are perfect, and he is always in control. Throughout the Bible, we see examples of God's sovereignty in action. In the book of Job, for instance, Job faced unimaginable suffering. Yet, in the end, Job acknowledged that God's wisdom and plans were beyond his comprehension, saying, "I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted." Even when we feel overwhelmed or uncertain, we can take comfort in knowing that God is orchestrating all things for his glory and our benefit. His purposes cannot be thwarted. The second part of Isaiah 14 verse 27 emphasizes the power of God's hand. It says, "His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back?" God's hand is a symbol of his might in action. When he moves, nothing can stop him. His power is unmatched, and his will is unyielding. When God stretches out his hand, it's a sign of his determination to accomplish his purposes. Consider the story of the Exodus when God delivered the Israelites from Egypt. Pharaoh, in his pride and defiance, sought to resist God's will, but he was powerless to stand against the mighty hand of the Lord. The plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, and the destruction of Pharaoh's army were all manifestations of God's unstoppable power. In Exodus 14 verse 31, the Israelites saw with their own eyes the hand of God at work. Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, so the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. When we face difficulties in our own lives, we must remember that God's hand is just as mighty today as it was in the days of the Exodus. No enemy or obstacle can stand against his power. His hand is stretched out to help, to guide, and to protect his people. Isaiah 14 verse 27 reminds us that there is no power on earth or in the heavens that can stop God's plans. His will is always accomplished, and his hand is always at work. In moments of uncertainty, this truth should bring us peace and confidence. We don't have to rely on our own strength or understanding. Instead, we can trust that God is in control, and he is working things out for our good. In the New Testament, we are reminded of the importance of trusting God's sovereignty. In Romans 8 verse 28, the Apostle Paul writes, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." No matter what we face, we can trust that God is working behind the scenes for our benefit. He is guiding us, providing for us, and making a way where there seems to be no way. We may not always see how, but we can trust in his perfect plan. As we reflect on Isaiah 14 verse 27, let it be a reminder that God is in control. No matter the challenges or uncertainties we face, we can trust in his sovereignty. His purposes cannot be undone, and his hand is stretched out to help us. When life feels difficult or uncertain, remember these encouraging words from the prophet Isaiah. "For the Lord of hosts has purposed, and who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back?" Take heart, knowing that the same God who holds the universe in his hands is holding your life as well. Trust in his plan and rest in his unshakable sovereignty.